Well, hello everyone. I am Cliff White, and I have Glenn Lewis here. We're two-thirds of the Strong Machine Adventure Racing Squad that went to nationals in West Virginia in September, and we're here to talk about that with some members of the Strong Machine Development Squad. And so, thanks to everyone for joining us. Before I start, I just wanted to quickly do a teaser for the Maine Summer Adventure Race, which we just announced officially will be in Bethel, Maine, up in the mountains of the White Mountains in Maine, in Western Maine, July 12th and 13th, 2025. We hope you guys can join us. I also wanted to give it a shout out to the St. Lawrence Adventure Race. It's a stage race up in Canada. And their registration just opened. And so urge you guys all to sign up for that. We had a couple of our team members go up and do it, and they said it was an amazing race in a spectacular location. And Endless Mountains, the expedition race in New England, has open registration. I think they only have a few spots left. So if you are looking for your first expedition experience or just to explore more of Vermont in beautiful New England, their registration is open. Our friends at Rootstock Racing are putting that on, and it's part of the Adventure Racing World Series as a full qualifier event. So pretty awesome opportunity for us New England racers and really anyone in the country, or I should say the world, because it's a world qualifier, should check that race out. It's pretty spectacular as well. They've done a great job with that in the past. All right. We're going to keep this to an hour, but we have a rough outline. We'll go kind of over our general thoughts about nationals and how we go about planning for it. This will be really useful for people who are looking to do their first nationals, which also recently got announced, will take place in Bentonville, Arkansas. And I think do you know the exact date, Glenn?
It's the second weekend in September. I
There you
forget
go.
what it is.
So that's a really cool location. Our team was in an Expedition Ozark last year, and they had great things to say about the area. So we're excited to explore it. We'll be back at Nationals next year, and hopefully this will serve as kind of a primer. We can help answer any questions that come up from any of the audience here, and kind of give you an overview of how we approach this year's race, where we were lucky enough and I'll say good enough to finish third place overall. We speak of luck, just to give some context. Glenn, do you want to maybe run through our history at nationals as a team?
I'd rather not in a recorded forum, but it's not good. I think the times I've raced with you, we had a terrible showing in Wisconsin where we um didn't read the map correctly, or there was like a different scale and there was like a magnetic anomaly
Yeah,
and
that
we
one.
were well off the map at one point. We went to California and um left soon after we got there. Uh And then last year in Vermont, I felt like myself, Kate, and Evan had a really good mindset. Like we were ready to go for the race, but it just did not go according to plan. Like nothing that we were doing worked, but we didn't really know why. So it was a pretty frustrating result. So like at the start of this year, I know I kind of set my sights on nationals as my A race for the year. So it was nice to finally go there with the right mindset, with the right team, and kind of get the result we were looking for.
Yeah. So, as more background, our team has been around for around 5 years, and we always target USARA Nationals as an important race for us during the year. But this year, especially so, we were in a tight race for the points series with a team from Wisconsin that I think they were winning by 15 points or so. So we needed a good showing. So that was factoring into how we wanted to race, like a head-to-head matchup. And then we definitely look at the list of teams that go. And I mean, at this point, we've been racing long enough to kind of know where we fit in. But I think, um, you want to race your own race, and we'll be talking about that a lot. But it is kind of important to know if you're trying to be competitive, how you match up against the teams that are going to be there, and as just a basis for setting expectations for the race. So definitely did some of that, but didn't worry about it so much. But I think we would have said at the beginning of the race that we would have been thrilled with the top five finish. I think that was kind of our a goal for the race. and we knew there were some really good teams, and that it was going to be a stretch to finish top five. So that was kind of where we were coming from. Um, so, what other things did we do to get ready for nationals, Glenn? Can you kind of lay it out?
We did some planning, like logistics, as far as like gear, arrival, timing, things like that. But I think we've done like the core group of the team has done so many 24-hour races. Even this last year, we did so many overnight races that a lot of the systems we have kind of roll over from race to race, like who's going to bring what, the team roles we're going to take. Um, the night before the race, I remember we sat down for a late dinner right in Snowshoe, and we kind of laid out like our final thoughts about what was going to happen. And I think that was when um, we kind of I felt like that was a real turning point for us just in the weekend. Like we kind of got into the right mindset. We had already seen the flyover and had the pre-race briefing, so we just kind of discussed what we were expecting from the course, and we kind of set our final roles there and our goals and how we were going to kind of work with each other and approach the whole thing. Um, I hope that makes sense, Cliff, or that's what you
Yeah.
can.
So I would say that even before that, I was thinking about like having a pre-race meeting, like
Yeah,
getting on the board with. I mean, we are all on board with how we train, but you can always get better at that, what you're training for. We knew the location snowshoe was going to have some pretty epic mountain biking. So you got to think that's going to play an important role in the race. We had heard that they had said it was going to be thick bushwhacking. And, with that, navigation becomes really important, being really intelligent with your navigation, like slow and methodical, and a little more conservative maybe than um, I would say other races where the terrain's a little more wide open and a little more forgiving if you're off on your um, declination by 10 degrees or whatever. But those type of factors all lead to success. The fact that the three of us, our third teammate was my wife, Kate White, and three of us fall race together, so familiarity with each other. That said, we talked about being really helpful with navigation. Like all three of us were always knowing where we were on the maps at all times. We were always sharing the maps and all looking at them because we really wanted to not screw up the nav this race. Like we were, I would say, and Glenn, you can talk about how we handled that this race versus other races. Very, the word I keep coming back to is methodical in how we approach the navigation on this race.
yeah. I think that's a good way to describe it. One thing that you were, as you were talking about all that kind of how we prepare, both mentally and strategically, is to kind of know the race director. I had done a couple of Adventure Addicts races over the last maybe 3 years. So just kind of having in mind, like it was helpful to know kind of what the races would kind of be like. I know the races were really well designed. Like they always had a good flow to them. There was always a lot of optionality. In fact, there was one race I did where there was one leg you could do either at the start or at the end of the race, which was a neat little component. So I kind of pictured that in my head. I hadn't done a race with their windows before, but I had heard about them, so it was just something to keep in mind. But like I guess a way to describe their races, kind of what I had in my head, is that there's always a really unique quirk to the races, not in a bad way, like in a really good way, like a way that separates their races from something else that you've done. So thinking about that as we're going in, not expecting it to be like a quote boring race where everyone's doing the same thing all the time. What was the other question you just asked me, Cliff, about the nav? Is that what you said?
Just being
Oh,
methodical in
oh yeah.
all working together at all times.
Yeah, so I took the lead on the nav for the whole race. The plan was actually to have Kate navigate the paddle, but when that got canceled, we threw that out. But I'm pretty vocal about what I'm doing when I'm navigating. And anytime I'm not 100% sure about what we want to do, I pull one or both teammates over just to look at it. It's helpful for them. I know, like the times I haven't had the map, it's helpful just to continually get a little peek so we kind of see what's going on, so you have a frame of reference. if I show you the map on stage 3 and it's 1 o'clock in the morning and you have no idea what's happening, it's not helpful to be giving, critical, like to help make critical choices at that time. Um, but yeah, I would say that, you know, while I was making a lot of like the micro choices, if there was anything we weren't sure about, we stopped and we talked because we know from experience it's better to take 30 seconds now. And really often the chats were less than a minute long. We'd stop and just say, we're here, we could do this, we could do this, or I think we're here, maybe we're there. What exactly do you think we should do? Just because fixing it before it gets out of hand is really important. I can't count how many times I've let something get out of hand, and then instead of becoming a 30-minute or a 30-second chat, it's a 30-minute error where we're off the map, we're turned around, we're backtracking. And in a race like this, where the timing was so critical, we knew that if we blew a chunk of time, that was going to mess up our whole race plan.
And the other side of the coin of that is we've let you do that. Just been like, oh, Glenn's on it. He looks really confident. Like we are chatting behind or we're not on it. We're not keeping you concentrated. We can even just have a little side conversation about the weather or something. And then all of a sudden, none of us really knows where we are. It was like maniacal how we stayed concentrated the whole race. Like we had no small chat talk. We had no side conversations. We were either quiet or talking about nav or talking about transitions. Like we were ruthlessly focused this race, and that I think really helped us because in Wisconsin we thought we were doing really well, and then all of a sudden we spent 2 hours walking in circles, and then Vermont, you guys were having a great race, and then you hiked up a mountain and got no checkpoints. like
Oh yeah.
it we've been burned so many times that we were like, this race, we're spending 30 hours completely in the zone. We're not taking a minute off. And it's hard to do, actually. But we pulled it off. And I think feeling like we were competitive helped with that. I mean, feeling like, all right, we're actually putting it together a really good race, like helped keep us in it instead of feeling like, whatever, like we're out here to have fun. Like I think, being competitive in that way did keep us more in line. One other thing I was going to talk about is, excuse me, our history of being at nationals, and just when we did sit down to do maps. Glenn immediate was like, wait, like how many times has more than 3 teams cleared the course at nationals? And we like,
That's actually something we brought
10.
up the night prior too. We said like if you look back, what I think we came up with 2 races, Cliff, in the lead up to 2 nationals in the last, I don't know, 8, 10 years, where it was a generally clearable course for a number of teams. Like I'm thinking um, of 2 instances, one that I did, and the one that I did, like it was really obvious from the beginning it was clearable. And looking at the numbers they gave us for this race, especially once we saw the flyover and then we got the maps, we're like, this thing isn't for us, like knowing our strengths, this isn't clearable. Um, and I think because of that, because we had talked about it before, I think we were very comfortable making the choices we made early on.
I said, yeah, why don't you talk about the maps? Because the maps we knew we were getting a lot of course when we saw the overview the night before, but then when we got them, talk about that experience. And then again, having to redo it after the paddle was canceled.
Yeah. Gosh. So the way I like to do it, like personally, I like to get the course book, get the maps, and just go through the entire race briefly but thoroughly. Like we'll look like, all right, like leg one is a trek. So we'll connect the maps to see where the trek goes. Um, and we will identify every point, make sure we've seen every point. If the map is a little hard to read, we might highlight the checkpoints at that time, but that's all we do on the first run through. We look at the entire course. Like, all right, leg two is that huge bike leg. We connect the, what was it, 2, 3, 4 maps. We see where the points are. We see a general flow, just so we kind of know what we're thinking about. And then the second time we went back through, we actually mapped out, like after we got through the entire course back to the finish line, we went back through and we marked out, well, marked occasionally. I don't mark a ton on the maps, probably less than a majority of the people who navigate. But especially for bikes, we kind of mark out a general idea of what we're going to be doing. Um, and we usually map out the full course, even if we know it's not necessarily going to happen for us. Like in this race, we were planning on dropping points, but we still marked out the whole course. If we beat a cutoff by a good bit, or if we had to drop a lot of points on one leg and then could get more on a different leg, at least we have the whole thing marked out. But we marked out the whole course, and then we went back through and we identified spots where we could um, drop points, like the points that were the furthest outliers for us. I mean, Kate was really helpful at that point because Kate's really good about timing of things. So while I was looking at the maps, Cliff's also looking at the maps and the course book, and Kate has the course book, and she's just reading through what we're looking for, reading for any quirks about rules or cutoffs, or you can't go here, you must go there kind of things. And the course book was helpful because it had time estimates. Um, and just kind of knowing how the three of us race, we figured it's a nationals, there's a hurricane, uh, and the course is too big. So our general rule of thumb was we estimated ourselves about halfway through the estimate window, if that makes sense. Like if the window said 6 to 10 hours, we said we're probably 8 hours on this leg. Um, so at that point, what we did after we had kind of marked out our route and seen kind of where we might be dropping points, we worked backwards. So we looked at the finish. We said we have to be here at what was it, 3 p.m., I think was the finish time, 3 p.m. So it said we have to be here at 3 p.m. We have to leave the previous TA at what time? And then we factored in, let's say, a 30-minute transition. We said to get here, we have to leave the previous TA at this time. And we worked backwards. And I think when we did it the first time, we had to start the first leg before 9 a.m., before the start of the race. So we're like, well, some things are going to have to change. And that's where we were kind of looking at, well, these windows are really critical, right? These windows with these bonus points in them. So to get the windows, we need to make sure we have enough time for those things, and we can drop out the other points, the other single points along the way to have more time to get those. So we figured out kind of how much time we needed, cut off those single or found places to cut off those single points to get us back to a time that kind of made sense at the start. I do want to mention those windows because that's one thing. Like following along with the race after the race, like looking at all the media stuff, it seemed like there was a lot of like flippancy towards the fact that there were so many bonus points on the course, which to me was surprising only because like you don't often get points that are worth more than one checkpoint. And I think there were 4 windows, and there was a 4 point window, which meant that the third point in that window was worth double. There was a 5 point window, the second to last window, where the last point, because it's worth 5 points, is worth 3 points. And the other two, the last point was worth 4 points. So like it was really obvious to us, I think, Cliff, you can tell me if I'm wrong, like we have to get these points. Like if we don't go for the windows, we're dropping a 4 point checkpoint at times.
So I'll say that one thing I do, Glenn typically is takes the lead on the maps. Kate is usually on the instructions, and we read the instructions very carefully. And they're working together, and I kind of break off on my own. And I pick whatever looks like the hardest navigational problem, and I just take that aside. I get out of their way, and I just start thinking about these, like how to attack that section. And obviously in this race the windows were really the navigational crux of the race, and so I spent a lot of time just staring at these 3 point clusters, and so I really had them in my head of how to attack them, how to look at them, and that has helped in a lot of races, and I think really helped in this one. I think the crux of this race for us was that last window. We got there in the morning, and it already felt like we were one of the last teams to get into that TA. And we like looked at each other like, are we going to actually have time to clear a window in this? Because those 3 points looked, and I think intimidated a lot of teams. They looked like it had a lot of vertical. It looked like pretty tough navigation, high up at altitude. But having the confidence of really staring at that, if we had any doubt, I was like, guys, we can do this. Cause I had just spent so much time looking at those 3 points. I was like, these are really doable, especially if it's clear up top. So I don't want to jump ahead, but just attacking the maps, it is nice instead of all 3 people to be putting their heads together, working linearly on the maps. Like I work really non-linearly, and just pick whatever looks like the most enticing or challenging navigational stuff and try and work on that. While um, the other critical thing that Glenn mentioned is getting the TA cutoffs. Um, I think the windows and the cutoff times were what did the two things that made this race work for us, and we're getting really good at that as well. Is correctly estimating when we need to be in and out of each TA in order to get to the finish, achieving our optimal point collection. So, you know, we need to be out of this TA by this time. And then we work backwards in each stage, even while we're in the stage. Like, okay, like we need to do 20 kilometers in the next 2 hours. Like, I think we're going to need to drop a couple points, like just the way we're moving, our pace. So instead of thinking about the only cutoff being the finish time, we think of each leg as having a cutoff time. And that was really crux for us in doing well at this race because we were racing each cutoff to each TA, but also cutting points along the way strategically to make the cutoff in our head, even though there wasn't really, I think there were cutoffs in the race, but we weren't really focused on those.
Yeah. Yeah, well, one thing I'd say in this race, the other thing I think you did, Cliff, while Kate and I were going through is you looked at that big overnight trek, and I think it was you, maybe I'm wrong. I know it wasn't me who realized that dropping those northern 3 points would save a huge chunk of time. That was helpful. And just like a second note about how helpful that is, the previous race we did together was the hard fall in Vermont. And at the end of that race, there was a trek on the mountain where we finished. And I remember getting to that section, and as the navigator, I hadn't looked at it, but Cliff had gone through that specific section and done a very detailed transposition of points from a topo to a satellite map, and he had an order laid out. So, like, I felt confident as the navigator just to take what he had done and run with it, and it worked out perfectly. So, having the team split up duties like that, we are all doing something different to maximize that map time is helpful. I think over the last 2 years, we as a team have gotten really good about using that time wisely. I never feel as rushed as I did before when you've got the maps before the race and you're, frantically trying to figure out what's going on.
One other thing before we dive into the race itself is just the weather factor. Um, Glenn, do you want to run through the thinking on that, how that impacted us?
Yeah, but again, just like the timing, we knew that the time was tight anyway, and add in the fact that there was a hurricane, like a genuine hurricane. The wind was a factor, honestly, to me, almost more than the rain during the race, at least at the beginning, because it never rained that hard, but it was just everything was like I've never been as muddy as I was on that long bike leg. So just knowing that that was going to be a factor, we considered that with single track, the points we chose to drop on leg two, specifically because, we knew that the riding was going to be wet. Um, I don't recall factoring in weather much else besides that leg. Maybe I'm misremembering something, Cliff.
No, you had mentioned that we just knew it was going to slow us down.
Yeah,
Like all those great mountain bike trails were going to be mud.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
so we factored that into our travel speed and cutoffs and all that as well.
Yeah, I mean
Um,
it certainly could have. I mean, it could have slowed us down up to 50% of our speed on dry terrain. Maybe it probably didn't, but it was certainly 10 to 15% of what we could have done if it was dry.
Also, clothing choice. I know we spent a lot of time thinking like, God, do we want to bring extra layers? Is it going to be cold? And ultimately, we went pretty lean. And
Yeah.
I think we wore our rain jackets for like an hour of the race, maybe that.
Yeah,
We
at the
were
start
in,
of the bike leg, and that was it.
we were in shorts, our t-shirts, and arm sleeves, and buffs and gloves. And that was enough heat regulation to keep us happy the entire race. Like the arm sleeves went up and down like 100 times during the race, and it made a big difference in terms of heat regulation. But especially in the morning, like we were like, why are people still wearing their rain gear? Like this is nuts. Like it's sunny out. Like you're just wearing, yeah. Like Glenn was apoplectic.
Yeah, like we've learned over the years that like Cliff and I, the two of us, suffer the most when we're too hot. And it's very easy when your body stops regulating your temperature well when you're tired to get really hot really quickly when you have too many layers on. So I wore shorts and a t-shirt the entire race. And I was fine. A little chilly here and there, but it was also not that cold, which was kind of a helpful factor.
Yeah. And obviously it's different for everyone and we don't want to
Yeah.
we don't want to freak anyone else out, but like again, a lot of these things are lessons learned from experience. Like, hey, I can get by without a jacket on. And a lot of times I'll be wearing a jacket and feeling cold, and then I take my jacket off and it actually dries me out if it's not raining. And I'm like, oh, that is much better than wearing that jacket and kind of being swampy. But okay, I'm going to pause here because we're going to jump into the race. Does anyone here have any questions, or do you want to relate your experiences in a educational, humorous, or otherwise fashion?
I saw there were two questions typed in, Cliff. I don't know if you can see those.
Well, one is about potentially packing puffy down
Okay.
jackets, and the other one is about coordinating training. And I think we'll do a separate webinar on training and stuff, but the short answer is yes and no.
Yeah.
Sort of, but we could do better in terms of coordinating training. Um, so, yeah, go Heather.
I know you gave a lot of thought to food as well because there were no TA bins.
Mm. Yeah, we because we had to be 30 hours with all of our stuff, we all carried I think we all carried like a saddle bag on our bike, like a larger one, almost for bike packing that I would normally not race with. And mine was just food. I just shoved as much food as I could in, packed it to the gills. Um, and then we kind of used like my saddle bag was my TA bin. When we stopped at a TA, when we got on the bike or when we got off the bike, I took food out, put it in my pack for a trek. I took food out of that, put it in my kind of bike bags on the bars when we were getting ready to bike. 30 hours is a long time, but like in the scheme of how much food you need, it's possible to carry it all. You just kind of have to be strategic about where you put it. So you're not carrying it in your pack the entire race, which was kind of a concern of mine.
Yeah, for anyone who doesn't have bike packing stuff, definitely worth investing in it for adventure racing. Uh, Getting that weight off your back is a huge deal. And if you get a saddle bag or a frame bag or a front mounted bag, like there's lots of ways to carry lots of weight on your bike. Let the bike do the work. Let the bike carry that weight and get it off your back. And then, yeah, so we split up our food. I had two Ziplocs in my saddle bag, plus all my food for the bike, like on my bike, like cup holders or frame bag. So on the bike, I was eating all that food. And then for the trekking sections, I had the food in my uh, saddle bag. And like Glenn said, at every stage, I grabbed that bag and that was my bag for that stage. So it was all pre organized, but exactly we used those bags as our TAs. Um, so that was kind of a clever thing, but that's the way you handle those longer. You have to carry lots of stuff, and then you have to make tough choices of like maybe I'm not packing, that extra layer. Maybe I'm not, and just like what can I fit? What can I fit? That was tough, but I did the Adventure Racing World Championship in South Africa, and that was last year, and they had like a 25 kilogram weight limit on the TA bins, and there were only two TA bins for a 10-day race, and that's four people. I watched the documentary with Safat, the Swedish Armed Forces team, and they were like, "We don't have enough space so we're just going to not pack food for an entire leg, and hopefully we find a store along the way and buy food there." like that's just a part of adventure racing, and you have to get really creative about how you're going to attack these problems, like how you're going to race with enough food, or maybe you're carrying a bigger pack, maybe you're carrying more stuff on your back, or anything you can shave off your back is critical for energy and time saved. But zooming ahead, are there other questions?
Yeah, one quick one.
Yeah,
When
go
you guys
Kate.
were talking about team roles,
Oh,
do you guys have a designated like timekeeper, like you were saying, to make sure that you're always on pace and working towards those cutoffs? Is there one person that's always watching the clock?
Yes. In this composition, something we tasked Cliff with, not just looking at the overall time, but also navigationally, he was resetting his clock throughout the race, a stopwatch or whatever he has on his watch every time we got to a checkpoint, when we left a transition, when we got to a critical juncture in a road. He was resetting, but also Cliff's really good about like the big, like the macro of the race, like looking at the entire thing and thinking, we've got this to do, we've got this many legs left, we have this much terrain to cover. So it kind of fits with how his brain works with the race. And it's really helpful, just having him look and know. We also wrote our cutoffs. I think we wrote them on the map, and also we wrote them in the route book. So they were written in a couple places so we could reference them. And we were just talking, like that was one of the things we talked about was cutoffs the entire time. Saying those things out loud.
Yeah, I would say Kate's actually really good at the macro, better than me, and that I my role when the three of us are walking along, I'm like calling out like it's been 5 minutes or it's been 10 minutes since the last uh, checkpoint or it's been 5 minutes since the last road, and I'm keeping all those numbers in my head in a rolling basis. It's been 2 hours since we left the TA. There's Evan, when we typically race with him, I took over his role in this race. We're 12 hours into the race. We have 18 hours left, like counting that down, just constantly being the numbers guy, altimeter. I'm the guy who's looking at the altimeter every step of the way to make sure it's not going wonky and to, remember to reset at known points. It was really important with the weather being so funky. That really affects the barometer, the altimeter, and it needs to be reset often in that situation. So being in charge of all that stuff, the watch stuff, Kate was really good about being backup or assistant to the regional navigator, and she just was keeping Glenn in line and like, wait, Glenn, like what you said didn't make sense. Explain it again. And Glenn being like, okay, like at first snotty and then like, oh yeah, like this is actually, I do need to explain this, even though it makes perfect sense in his head. You never know if, I mean, and this goes for all of us, like whether we're sleep deprived or too hungry to be thinking clearly. And like, if it doesn't make sense to the other teammates, we always spend the extra 10 seconds and explain it again. And just be really intentional about every move we're making out there. Like that's where we've gotten to in the racing, and it makes a big difference. Should we start?
Yeah,
Prologue, stage one.
yeah, so we got the maps for the prologue right before the beginning, and I'll be honest, this was probably our sloppiest part of the race. We were not paying, we got to the start, like we walked in and they were already singing the national anthem, and we were confused. We had missed some instructions, they were yelling them, but we couldn't hear them. So we got the map, and there were 9 points on the map, and we assumed you had to get all 9 points and then just continue to go to, um, like I think we thought like get all nine and then just go to checkpoint one after that. Um, so it was I think someone mentioned, or like we heard them yell like get five. And I was like, oh, okay, get five. So like I was looking like, well, why would anyone get those five? Let's get the five on the way to checkpoint one. And after we got the first prologue point, we looked at the instructions and we're like, we have to go back to the start finish with this map. So our prologue wasn't the most efficient. It wasn't terrible, but we just kind of did a funny order. And then we set off on leg one. Um, and I thought we were pretty smart about it. There were a lot of teams around. There always are at the start of these things, and it's so hectic. You think like as soon as a team gets out of your view, they're gone for the rest of the race. They're hours ahead. So we're like moving around, going crazy. We had picked our first point to drop on this leg, which was kind of like stressful because we got to the point where we were turning away from the rest of the pack, and we were there right behind Ben. Wadali was with us at that point. Like there were teams around us, and we're like, I guess we're really doing this. Like, let's stick with our guns and go. And honestly, it was kind of liberating to do that because once we dropped checkpoint four. Once we dropped checkpoint four, we're like, well, like it's not gonna like it's impossible to go back and get it. So we're on a short course anyway. Let's just stick with it and do what we can. We ended up running back into all of those teams 2 checkpoints later, and we didn't realize it till after the race that every team who caught up had an extra point. But still, it was like a mindset thing. We're like, like we're just doing our thing. We can't go back and fix it. We're just going to get the points we can get. Um, our only real navigation mistake was on leg one, or our only issue was on leg one, and it was up in that window. There's that point B, which was in a super flat area. The clue was useless. The terrain wasn't really helpful, and we were kind of in the area of it. Another team came by and thought they were at the point, and we kind of got pulled off our line, and then had to carefully recorrect. Yeah, like had to carefully recorrect. We did a really good job as a team at checkpoint B. We stopped and we were like, well, I know we're right around the point, but the point's not here. So like, what should we do? And at one point, we said, let's go to the high point that's near and then come back. And on the way to the high point, it was super thick. So we were like, that doesn't make sense to bushwhack to a high point so we can bushwhack down from a high point. So I think Cliff had the idea of like going to a ridge line that was a little less distinct but closer. So we hit that and then worked our way back to the point from there, and ended up finding it kind of exactly where we thought it was. We used all the tiny little like jigs and jags in the contour lines to find it.
My take on that point, thinking back on it, is 80% to 90% of the time, we can't find a checkpoint. We haven't gone far enough. And that's more often at night. But in this case, we were moving so slowly through that thick, rocky, crappy, and beautiful moss, but like just crawling that like your brain thinks you're moving or wants to be going faster than you are. But we really had like another 300 to 400 meters that we were short.
Exactly.
And the other thing I thought about is we were seeing a ton of teams in there. Like we weren't the only people lost. So that was kind of heartening. Like we were seeing lots of really good teams and we're like, okay, like we're not the only ones like struggling here. But then also like not that many. I always think about like where would teams screw up? And like if a lot of other teams, good teams are screwing up, that it's much greater odds that we're short than we're long. So like, can you make things match up that's short rather than seeing what's long, unless you have a really clear backstop that you're hitting, which this point didn't have that. But I just kind of thought like it's much greater odds that teams are that this many teams are short than this many teams have walked past the point and not seen it, especially because it was in a flat area. Like so one of these teams was going to see it if we were going through, but we actually formed an alliance in that area. I mean, that was pretty fun.
Yeah, there were what I think at one point there were 9 of us looking for the point, like 3 teams, and we Cliff and I think Cliff saw it first, and Cliff called over to those teams, and what seemed like 5 more teams like came out of the trees, swung from the vines, popped up out of foxholes. They were everywhere, and they were so excited that we had found that thing. I mean, we were probably there. I think we estimated we probably lost 40 minutes on that point. And a couple of the teams near us had been there just as long as us, and they were equally as lost. Like I never felt like we were lost. I just couldn't find the checkpoint in the area that I knew I was in. I think some of the other teams were like, we don't know where we are. Um, and that would like as a navigator, that's always the most frustrating part for me when I'm like, I know I'm here, I just don't see the flag. And we were, a couple times only 100 meters away from it, just a little off to the side.
I've got a question about that point. So
Yeah.
we did find it, and we didn't get lost or anything, but we started off trying to just kind of hold a bearing and pace count, and it was impossible to pace count. So do you even attempt to pace count in a situation like that? Or what I ended up doing was being like, there's this shallow reentrant, like way on away. Like once we get to that, we'll reevaluate. And it looked like it kind of thinned out a little bit there. It was like, okay, we're just going to try to hold this bearing now because I have no idea how far we've gone.
That's kind of what we did. The pace count was tough. We in situations like that, we use time a little more. Like like I think at one point while we were going, I was like, this feels like a 25 minute a kilometer, pace. Like it's like something like that. Like we are going slow. So just like processing like how long we've been going. There were also there were like a couple of those small features like like between A and B there was like a little like very shallow reentrant, kind of like I think you mentioned Kate, like we saw that. I'm like, okay, like the land is turning, so we know we're about here. And then we kind of just went more of like a, if we walk this way, we have to hit the point. And we were on the way until we got kind of pushed off by a different team who came and were like, it's got to be up here. And we turned a little right, and then that's how we missed it. Um, but yeah, I think just like being confident, and also that like that's what made that point so hard because there was no backstop. You couldn't pace count. You couldn't really time yourself, and there was no attack point. It was just go up there and hope you find it. The teams who found it the easiest, just for all of your benefits, if you didn't know, they went to that like south of B, like 400 meters south. There's a really tight reentrant, and they found that and actually found the road the checkpoint was on and walked right to it. Um, we did not. But they got like a 30+ minute jump on us just doing that. Uh, After that section, I think we had a pretty easy time getting to TA1 from there, and then we had a couple thoughts about points to drop on this next leg. We had actually planned on dropping any combination of 8, 9, or 10, which were the 3 bike points that made sense to drop. And while we were trekking, someone had asked me, they said, like, Glenn, which point makes the most sense to get? Which is the easiest one to get? And point 9, from my perspective, was almost entirely downhill from the TA. So I thought, let's get 9. And as we got closer to 9, I looked at the map and I'm like, checkpoint 8 is so close to us and it's so early. So I think I made a bad choice in the moment. I convinced Cliff and Kate to go up and get point 8 from there. We pushed our bikes up the hill to get 8. It probably would have been faster to ride around to get 8, but we got 8, we got 9, we dropped 10 from there. And then from that point, it was just like a line of racers for the next, what felt like 3 hours, where we were in a group of like 15 racers, 5 teams, 8 teams, something like that. And we slowly work our way through these racers on that muddy single track, and we'd get to the front. And then at one point, we stopped to take off our coats. And we stopped. We pulled off the side of the trail. We took off our coats, which we'd only had on for maybe an hour or so. And I turned around and I said, oh no, guys. And just everybody we had just spent what felt like 30 minutes passed us right again. And we kind of had to work through that. There's nothing you can do about that, though. The terrain was sloppy. It was slow going. I think we made up some good time by there was a point like on the side of a trail down like in a pond, in an island, in a stream kind of thing. And we made up some time there, got away from some teams. I can tell I like talking to people more than anybody, but
I
getting
was going
away
to
from
ask
those
about
teams
that
is really
point.
helpful. That one, yeah.
So, that there was a long way on single track between the point previous to that and that one. And we found ourselves stopping multiple times to be like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Do you just do the map wheel ahead of time and like go straight based on distance? And
So
not even like look at the map until you've gone a certain distance on something like that,
it's a
or some
great question.
checking point?
So looking at that specific one, I actually didn't use my map wheel. My map wheel, funny enough, is still in Snowshoe. I never got it back from the conference room. But I just estimated how many blocks it was. I think it was like 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I said something like 5K. So I'm looking at my odometer. I know in 5 kilometers we're going to be in the range of it, and we'll start looking for features that might show kind of where it is. Um, you could see the stream from you couldn't see the stream from the trail for a while, and then you could see it again. And when we saw it again, that's when I knew we were getting close. We kind of looked down and found a good spot to get it. Like once we got over that like 4 or 5K number, whatever it was, like looking at the map, the checkpoint was in the spot where the stream was the closest to the trail that it had been in a while. We looked for that and kind of threw our bikes down and checked it out from there.
And
Yeah, certainly not
um,
the easiest. And there wasn't a clear attack point. You can tell what they were doing with that point when they put it there. Like this is not an easy one to find.
and we stopped with Mark Latanzi, so that's always a nice thing to see him stopping. I've been fooled by Mark Latanzi once or twice, but we he was confident, Glenn was confident, and then we saw Heather's team, and we're like, Heather, these two guys are confident. If you want to come with us, join us. And then I felt bad because like these guys just like sprinted off, and I was like, goodbye. okay. But they were hot on the hunt of this point. Did you
Yeah,
have a question?
we tried that earlier, like probably 800 meters too early, but then we noticed that the bridge crossed the river and we couldn't see it when we were at the river. That was our only other clue. But yeah, very grateful to follow y'all to
Well, we, as you saw, attacked too early and then ended up like basically wading through the stream up to our hips for a while. But that's another just general tip. Uh, Nationals is going to get you nasty, and you're gonna like they were like, if you've never been in a bog before, you're gonna love it. And we're like, screw bogs. Like we've spent way too many hours of our life sitting up to our nipples in bogs. Like I do not want bogs in my life anymore, but it is just a fact of life in nationals. The quicker you accept that and just jump into the bog instead of like trying to find, you know, tenderfoot your way around puddles, like just go right through them, jump right in the water. Like you're going to be wet, you're going to be cold. Like you can save so much time by not caring.
That
uh,
that specific point, we got down to it and we were like, well, we're maybe like 100 meters before it. So I actually walked in the creek, like in the river up to the point, which was by far the quickest way to get there. We were also pretty dirty at that point.
yeah, and that didn't end. It just continued to get dirtier.
Uh,
So that bike leg continued. We went into the first window, right? And the
Yeah, we
trails.
had that like pocket of like single track points in that mountain bike park that was, fine. The sun set after that. We got to that window. The window was pretty smooth. There were a ton of teams around us when we got there. That D, E, and F window. The one thing I'll point out for us at least is we had run out of water as a team right around there. And knowing what I know about strip mines, at least in the Pennsylvania area, I was uh, I did not want to filter strip mine water and drink it. So we were like, well, we'll just filter water after this. We've been seeing water this whole thing, this whole race. And we saw no more water until nearly the end of that leg. So we went a while kind of hoping we would see water, but not really seeing much. Uh, I'm trying to move along efficiently. Let me think. I don't think there's anything else in that leg that was super critical, except we had one spot where like the trail ended, the road ended, and there was a trail, and we spent a few minutes kind of in the wrong spot, actually where we filtered water, trying to figure out where we were supposed to go. But just a closer examination of the information on the map helped us. The trail was labeled with a name, and I had missed that on the map.
In
So we
case
went back.
anyone on that trail was like, why are we on this trail? This trail sucks. That is also a common theme at nationals. Always never think, why does this trail suck? Why are we on it? Definitely make sure you're on the right trail, but never question if you're confident you're on the right trail, why you're on what on a bike leg on a hiking trail. That does happen occasionally. And
Well, so was that the fishing trail
Yeah.
thing down? So did y'all stay down there at the water, or did you go back up the road and go on that other trail?
I guess we went past the marked trail and there was like a little campsite, like with like a tent that was blown up. We filtered water there. We actually rode around in there looking for the trail and we couldn't find it. And we're like, well, something's wrong. So we ended up going back up to the trail that on that way was on the right hand side and went up that way. It was like a hiking trail that opened up a little bit the further we went.
Okay, we
Um,
did the exact same thing.
okay, yeah. Wasn't ideal. Um, I forget what time we got into that next TA cliff. It was closer to midnight than we wanted it to be. Um, but by the time we had finished that bike, we had been biking for 10 hours, maybe is my guess, maybe a little more than 10 hours. And we had cutoffs and we stuck with our plan there of dropping those first three trek points on the next leg. Um, which unbeknownst to us at the time was the move that got us ahead of the entire chunk of the race course, except for Rev 3 and Wadali. Every other team was still behind us doing 21, 22, and 23 by the time we finished 24. We had no idea.
the that trek, um, I wouldn't say made the race for us, but it's where we didn't blow the race. Would you
Mhm.
agree?
Yeah, it it was nothing remarkable for us except that unbeknownst to us, it blew up everyone else's race, if that makes sense. Like it was smart for us to do what we did because the points that we skipped caused a lot of problems for a lot of teams. Um, so like it was a really smart choice for us. We did not, we were really smooth on it. Even the teams who didn't have as much timing trouble still struggled to find, I think it was like 25 and 26. I can think of at least two teams who attacked one or both of those points and just didn't find them. Um, and I thought like looking at our track and how we did it, we were really smooth in that. We didn't have to look for a point. There was one funny point. I think it was 26 where I just had a feel we were walking. It was a tree line on the edge of a bog, and we were walking along a tree line, but we hadn't seen the point yet, and it felt like we had gone too long. And I said something. I was like, "Is this really the tree line?" And we turned to walk into the bog, and Cliff is like, "Glenn, don't be an idiot. This is like look behind us. There's like a massive tree line." So we turned around to go back to the tree line, and the point was right there. Um, and which was just, it was nice to know that we had walked the exact distance we thought we had. It was like this feels right. And oh boy, it was right.
So I don't want
Um,
to rush you, Glenn. It's clear
I
we're going
know,
to go past 9.
I
Kate is
know.
going to take over free at 9, so don't
Okay,
stress.
so okay,
Uh, I knew.
we're having
Uh,
so much fun, Cliff. You and I.
we are. We love this. So yes, don't stress. I could see you starting to talk like 300 words per minute. So
Will
So
do.
you skip 21, 22, 23, is that what you said?
Hmm. Yeah, we had a thought where we could have gone. We thought maybe of going to get 23 and then coming back to 24, something like that. But just like we were behind on our time. Like I have here on the map written. We for the full leg we had to leave by 9 p.m. and I think we got there after 11. So we're like we're done with this. We had to get out of there. Yeah, so we did 24, 25, 26. Yeah, 27, 28 were fine. 29, it's interesting, like kind of how my brain works in a race, what I'm focused on. 29 was that point in like the old growth, like red spruce thing that apparently was like beautiful and had a wonderful view. I didn't have a clue. Um, I thought it was just a point on like a crushed gravel path. Like it never occurred to me to look up, which is kind of typical for how I'm studying the map and looking at the race course. Like we didn't have a clue. I didn't have a clue there was anything neat up there. What else happened on that leg? Well, you know what? That next checkpoint was checkpoint 30, and that was the other one we screwed up. Oh, hey, Kate. Uh,
Hello.
um, checkpoint 30 is one where we just attacked it, and for some reason we walked through the like 30 was like in the bottom of a pretty wide reentrant, and we just walked right through the top of the reentrant without realizing. Fortunately, we were able to reattack 30 from the trail that was beneath it. Probably 15 or 20 minutes we lost on that point. But again, we kind of knew where we were. We were just like, this doesn't feel like we've like it felt like we had done something wrong. So we course corrected and went from there. Um, the funniest part of our race is that we couldn't find TA3 after that. We walked past the TA. We're like, this feels like we've gone too far. And there were other teams with us who also missed the TA. And I
We
don't
did
know,
too.
yeah, I don't know if I've done that before in a race. I don't recall not being able to find a large lighted parking lot before. Um, but that was pretty comical that we did that. And it was actually our first sign. Um, my first sign that we've been doing better than I thought we did, at least on that leg, is when we entered the trek, the sign-in sheet at the TA was packed. Now we know teams drop points and whatnot, but there are a lot of teams here, and we finished. There were like maybe 8 teams on the sign-in sheet. Um, and we also came into TA with Rib Mountain, and we were talking to Tim on the way in, and he had said they had just dropped like something like 6 points on the trek. We're like, oh, we haven't dropped 6 points yet, so maybe we're not doing like not that we thought we were doing poorly, but maybe our strategy is actually helping, where we were pulling away from some teams or getting a little gap. Let me look at that next leg and see. I think this next leg was one of the most unremarkable ones, to be
Was
honest.
that just that quick bike?
Yeah, with that little window and the points were the only thing I'll say, just like strategy wise, if it's helpful to know. Um, it's funny thinking about what that was during the race because before the race we weren't sure if we should go up north and come down past I or go in from the south. But coming in from the south, it was a road, and coming in the other way would have taken 2 to 3 hours on whatever that trail was. It was like a washed out hiking trail. So the fact that we even considered it is a little scary. Uh, but we didn't. We didn't do it. A thing I'll point out is we had planned on going H then G then I, like the south. We planned on going up, but we didn't see a good attack point for H. So we're like, let's get that on the way back. And then we got past G and we didn't see a good attack point for G, so we went past that one too. And just got to I and then turned around and worked our way back and we found good attack points kind of beyond the points. But again, I thought we were smooth, we were efficient. There was nothing super remarkable about it. I know personally that's where I started. I think the sun had just come up. I think it was like 7 a.m. ish. I don't know the exact timing, but that's not usually when I get the most tired, but it's when I have the most trouble focusing. Um, because it was another comical thing where on the way into TA4, I think it is, the one in the town. Uh,
TA4.
yeah, I was convinced we had also missed that TA.
Even though
Uh,
we were just saw racers like streaming out of it.
thousands of racers.
Yeah,
Cliff had to stop. Like Glenn, like I'm not looking at the map, but all of the racers are coming from
everyone's
that.
here.
Like we can't have missed the TA. And we obviously hadn't missed it, but sometimes I have many faults, and one of them is sometimes I need to be reminded of the really simple things in races. Like you're gonna find the TA, like that thing that you think we didn't actually do it. That TA, so interesting about that TA, something helpful. We had the paddle bag still there. So what we did, we had talked about it while we were approaching the TA. We always talk about our plan going into the TAs. And as we were approaching, we said, let's dump weight. We had been carrying a ton of stuff. We talked about the saddlebags and the food. So we got into the TA, we checked in, we checked out. I got a walking taco. And then we went over to our paddle bag and we took everything out of our packs that wasn't mandatory gear and that wasn't food for the next however many hours we had. At that point, we probably had 6, 7, 8 hours, something like that. So we took off the saddlebags. I had an extra layer I dumped, an extra jacket or something like that. Like anything, like arm sleeves or whatever it was, just throw it all in the bin. I don't,
Everything, yeah. Everything
yeah.
was wet too, so it was just nice to. It was funny. Usually, you get into a TA where you have a TA bin and you're ready to like grab stuff out of it, but we took zero things out and we threw only things in, which I think was
Are
a
you
new
allowed to
experience.
do that?
Yeah,
I thought when they tell you your paddle bag can only have these things in it, then
So
like
my
can only have paddle related gear in it, then by putting your not paddle related gear in it, is that
right. I think that you
fudging?
could interpret it that way, but
Okay.
that is not stated in the rules, so I
Okay. So
didn't
if it
interpret
is
it that
not
way.
explicitly stated, then you think it's fair game. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and I always interpret that. I've always believed that it's supposed to be interpreted as when you give it to them, being like they don't want to carry your food, they don't want to carry a spare bike tire,
Oh
but
yeah. We've
when you
literally
get
been at races where there's weight limits on bags and then people will bring extra stuff in their pack and after they'll see the bag later and won't have started the race yet and they will throw things into the bag so it is now over the weight limit. So yeah, which that feels a little more questionable to me, but but again, it's not like a stated rule, so it's sort of a
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I'd say
As
yeah,
a race director, we start putting a lot more stated rules once we see what people do.
yeah, I would say just on that note, when you think about those like bags and bins and rules, anything you see, interpret it as that's the rule when you give them the bin before the race, when you give them the bag
Yeah,
before the race, and after that,
definitely.
it's a trash can. It's like whatever you want it to be. And that's how we treated it. Uh,
I gotta jump, but Glenn, thanks so much, and we'll
yeah,
chat later.
see you,
Thank you.
Kara.
Bye, Kara.
The leg after that was like the paddle that was replaced with the bike, I think. Uh,
Yes. Yeah, I'm
and
looking
yeah,
at
we
the
went down
chat.
to that was I actually really liked that leg. It was unremarkable in like what we were doing, but it was super like rolling
It was
hills.
very fun. Yeah, it was a
Yeah,
nice,
like we
nice road
never,
to ride
it
on.
felt downhill the whole way, but it wasn't.
Mhm.
We were up, down, we passed a bunch of teams, we were flying. Um, and then we ended up having a big downhill into TA5, which was the one that was supposed to be in the middle of the paddle. And
Yes, the big downhill got us all nervous because we were like, "Oh shit, this is like not
that,
even the ski mountain."
and
Like,
every team we passed going down was walking their bikes up. I'm like,
yeah,
this is not going to be fun.
yeah,
It ended up not being a big issue for us coming back, but we were terrified at that point. And it also, again, at that point, from TA4 to TA5, we probably saw 10 teams. And it's helpful for us to kind of know our timing and where we are in the flow of the race. I know we've talked a bunch about like we're only focused on what we're doing. Like on that trek, we weren't focused on what the other teams are doing. We're focused on what we're doing. But we're also very cognizant of what other teams are doing. And we've grown mature enough that we can talk about it, but not let it affect our decisions. It's like we're like, oh, these teams are leaving this TA. They must have skipped that window. Or we got down to TA5, and I think I was ready a few moments before Kate and Cliff, so I was just looking to see whose bikes were there. Uh, Not that it affects us, but it's helpful to know. Just as we're thinking about how the race is going, who's still here? Like we saw Wadali's bikes. It's like, well, if Wadali's still here, then we can't be too far off in our time estimates from getting to the finish. Um, And this is actually the like we thought a bunch of teams were on this big window, the JKL window, but when we went up to we crossed like a swinging bridge, I think we walked up a big steep hill to get towards J and we saw Wadali there finishing their loop. They had gone a different way. And we saw no one else the rest of our time up there. And it turns out we did all three of those. I think Rib went up and did two of the three, um,
yep.
but no one else did any of those points. So we really were up there by ourselves for a while, and that was the most beautiful part of the race course.
It was like stunningly the views. It was open, like you could actually see everywhere for the first time. So
It was like yeah, like runnable. It was
yeah,
so
it was
open.
gorgeous. And like the sun was coming out finally. It was like a whole other race up there. It was just, yeah,
It's
really
nice.
special.
Yeah,
You guys do the two lower ones there, or did you skip those?
that's
Good
a great
question.
that's a great question, Derek. We did
We
so.
attempted both of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. We before the race, we had said if we have tons of time, it actually makes more sense to do the order that Wadali did, do the opposite order. But we knew that we were prioritizing the window, and like Cliff, I think it was Cliff kept saying like that third point in the window was like a 4 point. We have to make sure we get the 4 point points or the 3 point points or whatever. So
And
we
we
knew.
had set ourselves a time. Do you remember, Glenn, what time we said we had to leave
I
this?
think we had said 10:30. Like my map says
Yes, because
10:30. But
yes.
I think we said it's actually 11. I think we've given ourselves too
Yeah,
big.
I think we were like, we could do 11 if we had to.
Yeah. So I want to say we were up. Maybe I
I can
can,
see what time we got. We finished. We got L.
yeah, let
Let me
me
see
look
what
at the
time we got
tracking real
L.
quick and
Hey, this
just
is
see.
where things got really shady, like dicey,
Yeah,
scary.
emotionally does. They were,
Emotionally dicey.
I had a point. Let's see. We were up there
Let's see what time we got.
9:40.
Doesn't have
And then that's not
timestamps.
tracked. We did J, K, and L, and we got to point L probably just a little after 10. Um,
Yeah, I'd say so.
yeah,
And at least it was definitely after 10.
Yeah, and we were going back past 32 and 33, so we said, well, we should get them if we can. So, I feel like at that point, I'm always risky like personally, like I'm always risky at the end of the race, not to the point of blowing it and being hours late, but I always want to get one more point. So and also I've been looking at the map the whole time, so I know what that section looks like. So I showed it to Cliff and Kate. I was like, look, these points are really close to the trail. We really should get them. Um, and but because also one thing to think about, it's like a math thing. At that point, we had dropped less points than we had dropped less points than one window was worth. if that makes sense. So our thought was if we keep getting every other point, we'll have more than any team who's dropped even one window. So we're thinking like strategically, we want to keep getting as many points as we can. Now we got the 33, that was easy. And then Derek, you asked about getting both of them. We went towards 32, but we said as we got 33, it was I think like 10
It
and
was
our
it was al- it was almost
track.
11 by
Yeah.
then,
Yeah, I think
Glenn.
we left close to 11. It was like 10. It was after 10:30.
Because I remember I hate being late at the end of the race. That is as Glenn gets risky, I get risk averse. So I was starting to really freak out
I
because we
remember.
also 32 was in ridiculously thick rhododendron,
Yeah.
like so thick. And we so to the point where we were fine until suddenly we just couldn't move. We were like immobilized by this brush. So all I remember being like, okay, I was looking at my watch, like it is nearing 11 o'clock. We're supposed to be leaving TA by now.
Yeah. Yeah, at one point I was crawling. I was like hands and knees under bushes and I was calling back to make sure Cliff and Kate were with me because I couldn't see them. Um,
Yes.
but so to answer the question you would ask, we said we're gonna go towards 32. If and then as we got like, well, I think it was we're gonna try to get 32. And as we got closer and it was slower and slower, we said we're just gonna go through it. And if we see it, we're gonna get it. And if we don't see it, we're not gonna get it. And as we got closer, I thought I saw terrain features that lined up with it, but we just didn't see it there. So we went out to the trail. When we got to the trail beyond 32, it was very clear where 32 was. But at that point, it probably was a 2 or 3 minute backtrack to get it. And we were so focused on the time, like, we don't want to risk it being late for this one point because there was still one more window. So we just ran back to the TA from there.
It was a real bummer. I think that was a moment I know for me that got into my head. I was like, oh damn, like we just put all this time into because we probably lost, I don't know, 10 minutes in there, Glenn, I would
Yeah,
say.
in retrospect, it would have made more sense to go back to get 33. Like 33 only
Yeah,
took less than 5 minutes, but like
yeah,
probably 3 minutes to get to.
yeah.
And we could have just gone back and then run to 32, and it would have been much less time and one more
But it was
checkpoint.
so clear at 33 that we assumed it would be clear at 32, but that was where we're wrong. Like
It
obviously
was
there's
not
so
clear.
much.
Yeah, we were kind of in our heads. We had our um about 24 hours in, we always have a an experience where we dislike each other. And there had been a little coming together at point L where I had we weren't exactly sure if it was on this spur or the one other spur, and we stopped to look. And I think I'd given the map to somebody else, and I was like, you know what, I know where it is. So I just like not thinking it was. I just ripped the map out of someone's hand and began walking away. And
Yeah.
someone pointed out that it wasn't really a kind thing to be doing. Um, but it was just nice to like we were not snipping at each other, but like we been working hard. We had been soaking wet all day for 24 hours. We were stressed about the time. So like all of that kind of building, like I quickly apologized for that and we were fine. Like it was an issue, but it's something that came up and we're like, we are really like it helped us realize how tense we were. Not realizing it, but like, oh, like we're not really in the best state here where we're not communicating
Yeah.
well. So I think it was actually helpful just to miss 32 and all get back on the same page.
Yeah.
Like like a year ago, I would have said, you two wait here. I'm going to get that point. We would have, broken the 100-meter rule or whatever. They
Yeah.
would have been yelling. I would have not, it would have been stressful. And this was just a nice spot to say, yeah, we're not doing like as a team, we resolved a while back. Like we go together to every point every time. Like we don't even stretch the rule anymore. Um, so for that, it was nice. Like we didn't find it. We're like, we're not getting it. Like it's not worth whatever's going to come to go back and get 1 point.
Yeah.
All right, we got to that T, and then we had that one last that
Because
freaking
I think we left that TA closer to 11:30.
yeah. I looked
So
at yeah,
noting that we had originally been like, let's get out of here by 10:30. And then we're like, we could probably do 11. And then
yeah,
we're rolling out of there around 11:30. And that
yeah.
was when we were all like, oh damn, like we need to like pedal to the metal here.
I'm
Well,
looking
Kara,
at
Kara and I left that TA. What like we ran into Wadali coming down off of the high point back to the trail, like to then run in and go across the bridge back to the TA. And we left with them. And so y'all would have been still a
Way
long time
behind.
after. We were hauling even to get to the finish. Like, so
Yeah,
Yep,
I
we were late.
imagine y'all were in
we were 2 hours
a
behind
pain
you.
cave
We
for
were late.
We were two
a
hours
while.
further back on the course. That was so I hadn't
Late and
mentioned it.
stressed.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's why we were not being nice to each other. Um,
Yeah.
I hadn't mentioned this, but I was having some major bike issues in the race, where I couldn't. I had I only had like three working gears, and my chain kept getting sucked up into my front derailleur and nearly breaking a number of times. I thought my left crank arm fell off at one point. Like it was just not working at all. But as we went up that big hill out of that TA, I think like I had a couple packs on. Cliff was towing. I forget the specific situation, but we got to the top, and I was like, what we're doing wasn't working time wise. We were kind of scattered, so I was actually able to kind of fix. Like I lubed up my bike again, and it was able to work better. So I was feeling really good at that point. So I was able to help with a tow a little bit on that last huge switchbacky climb up the mountain, um, which like honest, I don't want to call it pleasant, but I think we just had a good mindset to it. We like we
Worse.
have to pedal up this thing, so we pedal up. It took a lot longer than we wished it had. Like
Yeah, we were
race
like,
time
this will
wise.
be 45 minutes, and it was longer than that.
Yeah, I'm looking at the tracking. There's a timestamp at the bottom of the hill at 11:52, and we did not get to the next point until after 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And that
Yeah,
last
sounds
window
nice.
there was nothing remarkable navigationally about that last window. It was pretty straightforward. I'm assuming you got that window, Kate. That's what you're,
Yeah, we did. We got that window.
yeah.
And it wasn't bad.
No,
Um,
yeah.
but we were Rev 3 was right in front of us, going into the first point on that window, and they blew straight past it. And Kara was doing the bike nav at that point, and she was like, I think we need to stop right here. And I was like, Rev 3 just kept going. And she was like, no, I think we need to stop right here. And yeah, we stopped, and the point was right there. And they ended up, we saw them like 15 minutes later turn around coming back. They had
Nice.
missed it by a
That makes
lot. So
that makes you feel
great on
good.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We things like you realize the more you're racing that like there are only very specific times when like I'm like there are very specific times when will 100% trust a different team. But often like if you're in touch, like you do your
Trust
thing.
yourself.
Yeah.
Always. Yep.
Um yeah, so we got those
Earlier in
points.
the race with Tim too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, remember when he like stopped and they were going right, and I was like, that was when we were with you, Heather, and I was like, there's no way. I don't know where they're going, but it's not the right way. And then they came crawling back after that.
Yeah. Yeah, and
It
again
was
like
really freaky because my team was slower, but we like saw the trail, and there were like 20 lights at like midnight looking at us coming the other way, and we're like, what is happening? Then we let them all go because we're slower. So.
funny. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Trusting other teams is it's a real gamble, like deciding what you're gonna do. And like I'm still like I've been doing this for a long time. I've done a ton of races and I still like there are times when I see a different team and I'm like a moth to a fly, just like immediately veer off my course. I'm like, I have to go there. That team knows what they're doing. Even if they have no idea. It's just like a funny moment since we're not sprinting through anymore. In last year's nationals, Cliff mentioned how Kate, Evan, and I climbed to the top of the mountain and found no checkpoints. We were so disoriented at one point. Kate said my favorite line, which was, "Let's go check with that team over there." Well, that team was a town like 2 to 3 miles away.
Miles.
But Evan and I were like, "What a good idea! Let's go check with that team." Like there's like it like but like that's how messed up you get. And you're like everyone else up here knows what they're doing except for us. It's important to just trust yourself. Uh, I will say race wise, I think as we left point N, we had about 75 minutes left. I think it was something like one or it was after 1:30 before
Yeah,
1:45.
and N was that observation platform at the top of the
Yeah,
railroad
we
line.
were. I'd say that's where that's the first real time that the stress of the finish came in. Like I knew, like I was confident we could get there. I'd looked at the map a bunch, but at the same time, like it was
Well, especially because I think the thing that
tough to believe it.
we knew, but you always run into this in any race is like what's the quality of the trail that you're going to be on. And when we were up there, there was a fair bit of, as I'm sure many of you saw, like decent double track road that was fine. But then there was also like deeply rutted muddy shit that was not fine. And at this point, we're getting to the end of the line here. Like dozens of teams have gone through, and so as like the more teams that have gone through, the messier it gets. So I think what really started to freak us out too is like there was some pretty slow going, muck up
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. The one thing we had in our favor, which is kind of why I budgeted that much time for that, like I knew we could make it, is because it was pretty much downhill from there,
Yeah.
at least back to snowshoe.
And back
Um,
to pavement. That was
Yeah,
the big thing.
exactly. So we knew we could make up a little time. Um, we just had to kind of book it. And fortunately, everyone was really in the mindset of like, yeah, we're gonna do this. Like we're gonna go. I think it was once we got O and then we got back to Snowshoe, flipping over the map back to map one was maybe the most satisfying part of the race. Like we got back to that first map and I was like, I know we're gonna do it, guys. I know we can do it. Um,
I will say that downhill, slip, slidey, muddy, like all the way back down to the train tracks was really fun.
yeah. Isn't
That
that
was,
isn't,
that was one of my favorite parts of the race. I was just like, this is awesome.
that's the more tired Kate gets, the more she likes things like that.
Yeah.
But isn't like didn't you fall there? I don't even remember I remember Cliff
So
telling me
I
you
don't know if
fell like
anybody
in
saw
your
me
eye.
after the race. I still have like a tiny bit of it, but I actually burst a huge blood vessel in my eye because I was also like, all right, this is like kind of feels like I'm skiing on mud, And so I'm like, going down and I knew I was gonna fall. I got into like a bad rut and I was like, oh fuck, like I know I'm gonna fall, but I saw this big thing of moss. I was like, I'll just aim for the moss. So I face planted into this thing of moss. Thank God it was moss. And I popped back up, like kept riding down. I was like, all right, I'm fine. And then Cliff looked at me and was like, what happened to you? Because my eye was just like basically all blood in the white of like a corner of my eye. So yeah, I had a fall, but it wasn't a bad one.
I've never heard that story. That's wonderful. But you can tell how
Yeah,
tired she
you
was.
were
Like I should put my face in that pile of moss that might be a rock over there. That's what I should do.
it's like that'll be a good way to get to stop.
Stop in my face. Um, from that, like once we got back into snowshoe, I looked at it like I had timed it out 100 times in my head on the ride there, and I knew we were gonna make it, but I knew we had to keep moving. I had in my head at registration there was a sign giving you the map to the bike drop the night before, and it was like 2.6 miles or something. And I was like, I know we can, like, if we get there with 15 minutes, I know we're gonna make it. Like I was so confident we could get back to TA1, and we rode through TA1 on the way back, and we got there with like something like 20 minutes left, and I was like, I know we're gonna do it. It was still a rough climb, and we were being so positive and encouraging each other, like, you can do it, we're gonna do it. Like it was so stressful. But making it back in, it was definitely worth the effort to have gotten all those points and finish. It's funny, we had done the math in our heads and I think we were like, I think we might have finished in third. Like we were like, this is wild. Like, could we have done this? Like counting off the teams who we thought would have beaten us, but like, didn't we pass them like doing this? Like, didn't this team have this happen? And we're like, I guess we're doing well. So we had that like euphoria driving us to the finish line. Because we were surprised every time we like found a team who like gave us a quick update. Like we'll chat with them. They're like, "Oh, I thought they would have been even further ahead of us. Like maybe we're doing better than we thought. Maybe our strategy's working." Um, but still, like it was neat to finish and kind of have that experience because I guess no one else knew that, which was a funny thing. Like I mentioned beforehand, like all the media was so focused on the teams who were on the full course when if you read the route book, it wasn't like that wasn't going to happen. So it sounds like we surprised a lot of people, which like personally, I think that's why they gave us that award, just because no one knew what we had done until after the race had ended, and they're like, "Oh, where did this team come from? I didn't know that they were being competitive." Um, yeah, and, the other thing I'd mention is like we had thought like we were actually like funny enough closer to second place than I thought we would have been, because Rev 3 ended up dropping points, dropping the big window we talked about off the paddle, just so they could get 34 and 35 on the way back. Um,
Yeah.
so we were,
Yeah, it's funny. I often think, I'm like, gosh, if we hadn't messed up that one CPB, I think it was in the first
yeah, we talked
window,
about that earlier. Yeah.
then we had budgeted extra time. We're like, if we have extra time, we'll snag with that one that was sort of near the finish line. Um, and if then we would have had time probably to get that one in the creek bed that we couldn't find in the second to last window. So anyway, it just, or near the second to last window. So I was like, oh, could have,
I know. Yeah. Yeah. It's
but we
funny.
all
You
have those
like,
thoughts at the end of the
yeah,
race.
there were like in retrospect, there were things honestly, I was thinking earlier in retrospect, had we skipped this is not like, this is a wild thing. Had we skipped the entire first window, we could have cleared the rest of the course.
Yes.
Because of how long point B, like because we were probably up there for more than 2 hours.
Yeah.
Um, just interesting to think about. We might have been
Yeah.
able to, but like it would have been tight. But it just interesting, like the like revisionist history of that. You're like,
Yeah.
Yeah, and it wasn't even just the time looking for B, it was the time getting from A to B.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
it was not. That was
It
not
was
fast.
thick in there. Yeah. Yeah. It was super
Yeah,
thick.
I don't know. I don't have a real. I don't recall a real good timing on it, only because it was so hectic up there. But we were in that window for a while.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't see
At
a lot of
least.
time
I mean, yeah, I
saved.
was thinking if it was 40 minutes up at B, we were probably in there for 3 hours, like as compared to just skipping it and leaving.
Mhm.
Which is, it's funny. It's like I mentioned, like as we're kind of wrapping up, I mentioned at the start that we had sat down for dinner the night before and we talked about like we are going to skip points. Like we said, at most three-ish teams clear the course every year, and then we looked around and we're like, we're not the first, second, or third fastest team here.
But also, I wouldn't say that that was honestly the biggest reason because every year is a little different. Like, I think it was
Correct.
more
Yeah.
also like we knew it was a hurricane.
Well, yeah.
And we
Well,
knew that,
exactly.
like, there was like this course, if, is a big course probably going to be, and like in good conditions, it would, yeah, maybe only be a handful of teams that clears it. So, like, no, this doesn't seem
Yeah.
clearable.
Yeah. That's like considering what we knew, like this is not one of the few courses that's clearable. We're gonna need to make those choices. And it's funny, like the night before we might have said we should drop one window and get everything else. But even when you get the maps, like we can do this whole course. It's look, all these points are right here. Even though we know that's not possible. Like we kind of joked we were sitting at the very front of the conference room doing our mapping right next to the microphone. And we were only one table away from Wadali, and we heard them before the paddle was canceled. We heard them saying something like, "So which point should we drop?" And like for us, we're like, "Oh gosh, like maybe we should just get them all to beat them," is what Kate said. If they're dropping points, if we clear it, we'll win. But just like the idea that like a team of that level was like, we can't get all these points, it does like encourage you, at least encourage us at that point. Like we could probably stand to skip some points and know we're gonna have to skip some points, even though the paddle was canceled.
I
Uh,
was going to say a thank you to Kate because you mentioned that if you had time, you might go get 35, that last point near the finish. And Kara and I got to the finish and we were like, I don't remember how much time. It wasn't a whole lot, but we were like,
Yeah.
I think we can get it if we go hard. And we're like, we will spend 10 minutes going in that direction. And if we can't get it in 10 minutes, like we will turn around and come back. And we went hard and we ended up getting it and and came
Nice.
back. So it was exciting and I don't think we would have thought of it before. But that was like
Yay.
our character building point of can we
Totally.
get it get back?
Oh, that's awesome. I'm glad somebody did that cool strategy.
that's really cool. I like to hear that. We yeah, I mean that's kind of how that's how it happened. I don't know. We I saw someone ask Heather, did you come up the road, that huge road ride that was a
Oh, yeah, I
never
was wondering
ending?
how that was. That did not look honestly
No,
any more
leaving,
pleasant.
it did not. Like leaving the next day, we're like, I can't believe there were teams here, because my wife had been there with the kids and she was telling us where she had seen teams, and I was like, no, you didn't see teams that far away. And as we're driving down this never-ending road, she's like, there were teams here and here. There were still teams there. I was like, that must have been
There
a
was
real
no
shock.
good way back to Snowshoe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was truly awful. And we didn't know how late we were running until we saw the sign that said 7 miles to Snowshoe, and we were still just hiking up a mountain.
Oh my God.
And then we realized we weren't going to make it in 30 hours, but maybe 31.
Were there teams with you, or was it just you?
Yeah, because my teammates were a little bit maybe losing hope. And I was like, feel this hope. Maybe they'll change the rules. Maybe it'll be a 31-hour race. Anything can happen. And then three different teams came by us. So we're like, okay, we're not the only late team. We are still kind of in the race to not be last.
Wow, that's tough. I mean, it's just like it's tough to have that happening, but it's also tough to be at the bottom of a massive mountain and say, "Well, the only way to finish is to continue doing this. There's no shortcut." Um, so good for you for getting to the end. That's awesome.
Yeah, one of
I
my teams is
loved
pretty
what you
sick.
said before, Heather, when you were telling your teammate, like, nobody's coming for, like, you were such a good, I think you held your team together and kept y'all going. Like, I was so proud of you for what you were saying to your teammates.
Thanks. Yeah, it was really hard, and one of them was sick, so I was pushing two bikes up the mountain. And yeah, one of my teammates, I think, thought that the race director would come get us. And like, no one's coming to get us. But then when we started seeing teams, I think my teammates realized, like, no, we're finishing this.
Yeah.
Mm.
Good for you guys. And hey, like it's those we've all had those moments and those feelings of like, well, clearly like I can't possibly, continue in any way. And then to have to do it, to get yourself up the mountain and finish, I know you know this, but I hope they also felt like, okay, like we can do hard things,
Yeah.
For sure.
Gosh.
I have a question, if you don't
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
So going back to, you skipped 21, 22, 23, but went for 24, 25, 26. That like goes against what I would assume, because 21 through 23 are like kind of close to trail, seem quick to get to, versus like going down a bog, down a road. So can you just tell me why you chose those three instead of the other three?
Yeah, let me find the correct. I grabbed the wrong map here. I'm almost positive it was only a distance thing.
It was.
We're
Yeah.
we're looking, yes, yeah, map sticks. Yeah, we were looking to cut time. Like we did not have enough time to do the whole course. And looking, I think 21 was probably 2K on road, 23 was probably 2 more K.
And elevation. We were thinking
Yeah,
it was
so
distance and elevation. We also knew
it's probably
Michelle had
7K.
said, yeah, and remember Michelle had sort of pointed out too that like that section of map was funky with like there were roads that looked like they should be there, but were like old, maybe you'd find a
Yeah.
roadbed
Something you would
somewhere,
have
but
written on
they
there, Kate. Yeah.
yeah, so I think we had a sense too that like it could like some of it looked like there were lots of trails up there, but maybe there weren't as many as there appeared to be on the map. But I think it was yes, it was purely distance and elevation that made us choose to skip those three.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like we were confident that we were going to find the rest of the points. Um, but I understand exactly what you're saying. Like those ones look like they're closer, they should be easier. But at the same time, we were like our focus was on getting the bonus points, so we didn't have time. Like we needed to get I think I said we
Like
were
get us off this section.
yeah, like we were 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours behind our estimate to get the full course. So we had to cut a ton of time. Again, I think the estimates like that to get from there to 24 is like 8K, 7 to 8K. And otherwise, we just walked, 3.5K on roads to get to 24. So it was much quicker.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I mean, I wonder how Derek's doing. Derek, how you doing?
I'm all right. My knee is good at the moment. It cleared up fairly fast after the race, which was weird. And then I had another like exacerbation of it, and it went back to feeling exactly how it did, like same spot and super sharp pain and the whole deal. And um, but I did get an MRI, and it came back like completely normal. So I really don't know what's going on. But I so far I've been able to train again and not have it come back. So I just kind of have to keep pushing, and then if it comes back, like try to get into the doctor while it's really angry and see if like a physical exam can find something instead of an MRI. I really don't know what's going on.
Hmm, that stinks. Hope it gets better for you, Derek. You got a whole winter to get it figured out, hopefully.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I ran today and it was fine. So I don't know. It's very strange.
If it makes you feel better, I have this pain point on the bottom of my foot that happened on the last leg of the 2020 C to C. That's never gotten better. It will go away for a month or two, and then it'll come back when the racing season starts. And it feels like there's something almost disconnected between the bottom of my foot and like the ball of my foot. It's like it feels like something's moving around.
Yeah.
When it moves in the right way, it feels like I'm stepping on something sharp. Um, and I'm finally having a podiatrist look at it right now, but I've waited 4.5 years to have it
I
figured out.
haven't complained at all about it, Glenn. I don't think I was even aware about it till Cliff mentioned you were getting cortisone shots.
It doesn't feel good.
Yeah,
Like it's also like if I just walk on my foot in a different way, it'll kind of go away. Um,
weird.
yeah, it's like one of those things you just kind of like. It sounds much less painful than what Derek's dealing with. Like I can still do things, it just doesn't feel good. But I'm also trying to get that fixed. It's not going well so far. The cortisone did not work the second time.
Damn.
So,
Derek was my MVP because he crewed for us at TA2 and loaded our bikes and loaded my water, and there was no water there, and he gave me his water. It's super generous. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
that's awesome.
Um, I, can you go back to ABC
Yeah.
and so we actually wasted more time on C than B because we went from A to B really efficiently, as efficient as you could be through that awfulness. And then I feel like we found the point fairly quickly. And then B to C, we had a backstop now. Um, like we talked about it after where I think we thought like, oh, this should have been much easier than it was. Um, but we ended up going more left, and we did that on purpose originally because we had that backstop, and then there was that one building on the map. So we were like, oh, we can use the building as a safety net, that kind of thing. But we got sucked way left. I think just terrain and then brush wise. And so we started looking for it, but we didn't realize how far left we were. And then we finally made the decision like, let's just get up to the road, find the building, and then reattack. And we did. And it was like, oh, damn, that was not really that bad, except for climbing up that waterfall. But like,
Yeah, we didn't get that cleanly either. We came down. I said it was smooth, but it was just because like it was slow, but it wasn't terrible. We came down from B, hit into that reentrant above like the big reentrant, came down towards the building, and we're like, well, from the building, we should be able to find it. And to be honest, I think there was something is it's not like terrible, but there's something like mismapped in that area because the building and the point were not lined up correctly. Um, because we like we came by the building. I'm like, I think the point should be up there, and I did the thing that we talked about earlier. There was a team there. I'd never seen them before. They were like newer racers, and they were standing at the bottom of that reentrant where the point ended up being, and they were looking for the reentrant where the point was. So I was like, well, we must be one short. Let's go further. And then we ended up going a bit further, going up, and then coming back down to the point from the top. Um, yeah, but it wasn't, I mean, we probably spent, I don't know, thinking now, I guess I didn't mention it before, we probably spent an extra five, it was probably less than 10 minutes, but figuring out what was going on in there. It was not smooth, and there's a lot happening on the map that's not all, there's a lot happening on the ground that's not happening on the map there.
Oh yeah.
I actually heard of a couple teams also saying that they struggled with C. So I think there was something funky there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've got pulled really. It was really far left, and
Hmm.
I still can't explain it.
Yeah, I don't, yeah, like, it just wasn't, there was a lot going on. And that big building is not what was expected. It wasn't in the it didn't line up with the point in the way that I thought it was going to. Um, yeah.
Yeah, if you were standing at the building looking across the creek, the point seemed like it should have been further right than it was.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Okay. And then the only other question I had was like kind of an overall Monday morning quarterback thing with your route choices and points to skip, because I had kind of thought this as well, and you had mentioned it, but like skipping 8, 9, 10, like if you had done that right away to stick with your strategy for the overall race, that would have, do you think that would have bought you the time that you needed for, spending more time at the 32 or whatever, and then, you know, potentially taking, had you guys ever considered taking the trail all the way to get those last two to the finish?
Yeah, we like 34 and 35, you mean?
Yeah, yeah. I figured that
Yeah,
was like a game time decision when you got to the junction there.
yeah, we had planned on it, but we knew as soon as we climbed up the hill, even before we got M, like on the way up, we're like, there's no way, like we were out of time. Like, there's no way this is gonna happen.
Yeah, yeah.
So we scrapped that idea. We had marked out the other route. We're like, we're taking that. We're not doing this. Um, yeah, there was no way for us. But yeah, like, to answer your question about like what we could have done, I think, again, all in retrospect, we could have probably gotten more if we skipped 8, 9, 10. But we only got 8, 9. We skipped 10. Um, had we just ridden from TA right out to checkpoint 11, I'd have to look at maybe some better timing. We might have saved an hour, a little more than an hour.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, I
know,
was
that
wondering
would have,
that too, because we ended up, I had originally mapped it out of riding, kind of doing the uphill right away, going around the top to 8,
Mhm.
like staying on that higher trail.
Yeah, and that was a better choice than what we did. That was the
And
right choice.
we ended up not doing that. We ended up doing the kind of like traversing across the mountain on the cat track. We stopped right at the bottom of the black trail.
Hmm.
We didn't go up the blue. We just dropped bikes and walked up and down the black trail.
Mm.
Then got back on, and just because it was a distance thing, and I figured like pushing up the blue trail was going to be a long distance, and then pushing up the black trail, there were teams coming down with bikes on the black trail, and they were like, this is not even rideable down, never mind up. So
Yeah, I learned a tip I got from an experienced racer I raced with a long time ago was, if you can push your bikes up, like if it's going to be rideable down, it
yeah,
always makes more sense to push the bikes up, because it's walking up a hill versus walking up a hill with a bike. There's a smaller difference than running down a hill versus riding down a hill. Like you gain more time riding down.
yeah,
So like I always keep that in my mind. I try not to drop my bike in spots where I can then ride my bike, if that makes sense. Like I try to take the bike as far as I can.
sure.
Um, and it's funny, you mentioned that blue and the black trail. I didn't notice the black trail till we were back down. I only realized we were on the blue trail when we got up to the top and we weren't where I thought we were. Um, which kind of explains why it took longer than I thought when we were pushing our bikes up. I don't know if you remember that, Kate. I was like, it's gonna be 10 minutes. You're like, this is not 10 minutes. It was 15 minutes up. Uh, um, yeah, I think Had I seen the black trail, I would have done what you described, but with bikes, and it probably would have been a worse decision. So I guess we got lucky. But again, I want to point out that was all the wrong choice. The correct choice was to just ride our bikes over the top to 8.
Yeah.
Like if we were going to get 8, that was much faster. Would have taken us 10 minutes to get there instead of whatever we did.
Yeah.
Did you ever?
That
Oh,
black trail was a steep climb.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, did you ever consider taking your bikes on the foot window at the mine that you were allowed to take bikes on?
I thought
I thought we weren't allowed
yeah,
to.
we saw bikes in there, but I don't have the route book anymore.
I'm gonna look at it. I
You
have
were
it.
allowed to take bikes in.
I thought it
You
said you had
were?
to drop bikes on the road. Oh, you know what? It said, so this is one of those things where again, in retrospect, we should have asked for more information because it said drop bikes along the road or something like that. And
It
Michelle
did.
on the
Yeah, and which
microphone
where
and
was
said,
that?
you're gonna
Yeah.
like she gave a clarification. I forget the wording she used, but she basically said you're gonna want to drop your bikes. Like she made it sound like you had to drop them on the dashed line as opposed to the black line on the map. Um, and
Is
I
that
think
window number? Oh no, yeah.
it was
Oh,
it
this
was
was
window 2
window
at the
number
strip
2,
mine.
right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Where is
You are
it?
correct, Kate. Based on the wording, it would have made sense to take the bikes in further. But um based on what she said, I thought she meant we can't take bikes in. And also the way we did it, the bikes wouldn't have helped because we came out from F so close, like we did D, E, F. I think we saw you there at D, right?
Well, I think I was confused. Was it anywhere along the road? I was unclear which road it was referring
Yeah, when
to. That's right.
yeah, I think Michelle said the road that you ride in on,
Yeah.
but it doesn't say that. So you could have taken your bikes in. But again, I don't think it would have helped because we didn't go back to where the
That
bikes were.
route, yeah, wouldn't have worked well for us. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. I gotta get running. I gotta go to school tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I got to see everybody for a little bit.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for doing
Thank
this.
you.
It was fun.
Yeah, thanks.
And congratulations on a great race.
Thank you.
An exciting outcome.
It was. That was a hard race. Congrats to everyone for taking that on. That was for real. That was a big one.
Yeah.
And a circle, so you couldn't cut it short.
Nope. Not in any way. Yeah. All right.
Kate Bloom, I might see you Sunday. We'll see.
Oh yeah, please do. Come orienteering at Fairbrook and Hollis. I'm gonna be working the registration tent.
I
Oh,
heard.
nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, have a good night, everybody.
Night. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.